The proof exists. Israel has done what it so chooses for many years. This is not the first such incident. And Anne on the blog says Israel can and should do everything necessary to defend its citizens. The world doesn't like it. Well, tough. You can post now at the blog worldhaveyoursay.com. And over the last couple of days, we've been asking you to post your video comments and questions there for this very debate. Thank you to all of you who've posted there. This is the comment from Otto, who's in Switzerland.
Can anybody tell me why we are totally unable to react when a whole society is destroyed by economic sanctions and a blockade? Now that the rockets are flying, the bombs are falling and the blood is flowing, of course our media will flock to the Gaza Strip and to get their footage. But nobody even tried to prevent this crisis. During 4 months of the ceasefire, there were no rockets and no suicide bombings, but the blockade was never lifted. What was the Hamas supposed to do? Just to watch and stand by when the living conditions of the people around them were degrading every day?
Also, thank you very much indeed for emailing that question. Thanks to Chloe as well. Well, let's put that point straight to Mark, who's live from Jerusalem. Mark, Otto in Switzerland saying the root cause of this crisis isn't the rockets, it's the blockade, which is affecting everyone who lives in Gaza. Wouldn't it be better if Israel lifted it? Wouldn't that be a step in the right direction?
100%, and I'll tell you, we tried many times. 2 years ago, we left the Gaza Strip at great political expense within Israel. It was not an easy thing to do, if you recall the images. Prime Minister Sharon was very brave in doing that. The expectation that we had in Israel was that the Palestinians would use this withdrawal to start to build their state that would be in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in the near future. We hoped very, very much that that's what they would do. But what did they do? Every time we opened up the crossings, they sent bombs, terrorists, suicide bombers. There was no way to open up those crossings. Talk about crossings. I don't know any other country, talk about doing whatever you want, that would open up a ceasefire for 3 hours so people could get food during a war. I'm sure that the Brits didn't do that during the Falklands. I don't think you did it in Iraq or Afghanistan.
But Mark, do you feel that this blockade may be creating a pressure on Palestinians, which in turn creates people who are prepared to send rockets into your country?
I think it's a vicious circle. I think that if the Palestinians stop, it would leave the crossings open. We would leave the crossings open. We're talking as if this conflict just started 15 minutes ago. This conflict goes back a long way, and I think it's a bit simplistic, some of the things that are being said. Israel attacked the Gaza Strip and Hamas in particular after Hamas broke the ceasefire. None of your
well, Mark, as anyone listening to BBC World Service Radio yesterday who heard the World Have Your Say edition on the radio will know, who broke the ceasefire is something which Palestinians and Israelis don't agree on. But I could see SHERYL in Washington shaking her head when I said, would it help if that blockade had not been there for the last 6 months? We're going to come to you in a moment, SHERYL. But first of all, let's turn to Edward. He's a World Have Your Say regular. You may read his comments on the blog and have heard him on the radio programme. Let's bring him on to World Have Your Say on the television live from Nairobi. Edward, we've guests from the Palestinian territories and from Israel. What question would you like to ask them?
First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I would like to ask the guests from Palestine, at what expense would you rather have Israel suffer the rockets which are being fired? At the expense of their patients, at the expense of their citizens, or just at the expense of achieving your political means in time through Hamas, which means to eradicate Israel?
OK, well, let's put that point to Adwan. He's a Gazan who lives in London. Edward's point simply, do you think that actually by sending these rockets in, you're doing your cause more harm than good?
No, I think this question should be asked to the Israeli army. I think...
But it's being asked of you. This is Edward. He's a World Have Your Say listener. He wants to hear from Palestinians. He says, is there a danger that you might be doing your cause more harm than good? What will you say to him? He's listening to you now.
I think targeting civilians is wrong in any part of the world. But Mark said Israel disengaged from Gaza 3 years ago. I'll tell him it's true. Israel pulled its troops out of Gaza 3 years ago. But they kept in control of every aspect of life in Gaza. Politically, economically, every aspect of life in the Gaza Strip. If they really want us to have a state, why don't they withdraw from Gaza and the West Bank and let us have a state? I think the Qassam rockets, which is Hamas is throwing, is only a little thing that can reach a voice for the Palestinian people who can, so they can hear us, basically.
Adwan, thank you for your answer. Edward, stay with us because we'll get you a second answer to your question. SAMEH is a blogger in Gaza, live on the telephone from there now. We can speak to him on BBC World News. The question from Edward in Nairobi is, are the rockets being sent by Hamas damaging the cause of Palestinians?
Well, let me just go away from the cause of Palestinians and say that Israel was never interested in peace. President Abbas is a good man for peace. He went to Annapolis by 2007. At the end of the day, he got more settlements in the West Bank, and he got just cold shoulders from President Bush and Israelis. And this is the only thing harming the Palestinian cause.
But I understand that point, but it's interesting that both you and Adwan have replied with a reference to Israel. Well, I'm asking you about the behaviour of your leaders in the case of Gaza, Hamas, in the case of the West Bank, Fatah. Are you satisfied that firing rockets into southern Israel is furthering the cause of all Palestinians?
Well, for me, journalists, I don't want to say my view, but I could say that the issue of the Israeli war in Gaza is bringing more publicity and bringing the Palestinian cause back in all streets of all capitals. And now you could see on the TV protests and demonstrations across the world. And the stance of Mr. Shafez, he's not Arab, he's not Muslim. He kicked out the Israeli ambassador in a way or another to say that the Israelis are doing wrong. He's not Arab, he's not Muslim. And Israelis have to realize that he was not Arab, he was not Muslim, and why he did this.
Good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on to World Have Your Say live from Gaza. Well, let's go from Gaza back to Jerusalem, where we can speak to Mark, a regular contributor to World Have Your Say from Jerusalem, a physician. Mark, we've talked a great deal about the disagreements that you and your countrymen and women have with Palestinians. Let's look ahead as we speak. There are diplomats in Cairo trying to find a ceasefire which will hold. What are your criteria for a ceasefire that you would support Israel signing up to?
I think the criteria for a ceasefire are the ones that we've heard in the media. A ceasefire, meaning that the rockets stop raining down on us. The rockets stop raining down on us, we'll stop shooting back. As well, something very important we haven't talked about is the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tunnels that were burrowed under the Gaza Strip in the direction of Egypt. You keep in mind that Egypt also maintained a blockade on the Gaza Strip. We haven't discussed that very much. And is that because they hate the Palestinian people or because they're afraid of Hamas?
So two clear objectives from you. First of all, the rockets must stop. Second of all, the tunnels need to be stopped. The smuggling of arms from Egypt into Gaza needs to stop. Let's go from Jerusalem to Washington. A quick comment from you, SHERYL. You're a lawyer in the States. Do you think that America should stand full square behind Israel in demanding both of those things before the offensive in Gaza stops?
Absolutely. I feel that Israel, as a democracy, has a right to defend its citizens. I feel Hamas does not have the interests of the Palestinian people behind them. And I feel they're terrorists. And for a ceasefire, Hamas needs to stop the rockets. Israelis have been living 8 years with rockets coming into Israel. I was there in Sderot, actually last February, and I got to experience a rocket and sniper fire.
I want to make sure our two guests in the World Have Your Say studio get a chance to respond. But before we come to you, let's hear one last time from Chloe, because we are getting a lot of response from BBC World viewers all around the world.
Absolutely, Ros. Ruth in Jamaica says, this is a loaded question. Israel is entitled to take whatever steps it deems necessary to protect its citizens. Stephen in Boston, Massachusetts says, where is the decisive UN intervention? Where is the outrage of the Arab world? The fact that these questions even have to be asked should tell you something. Isaac in Kenya has emailed, you guys leave Israel alone. Why do you always have to talk of Israel? Yes, it can do whatever it wants because it's an independent state.